everyone, welcome back. Today we're diving deep into a sermon all about accountability.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's by Pastor Ricardo from Fountain of Grace International, Pretoria North.
Mhm.
And he really brings it home, making you think about if we're really accountable for each other.
So what's the sermon called?
It's called Living for Your Brother, Living Accountable, Being Your Brother's Keeper. And it's based on Ecclesiastes 4, verses 9 and 10.
Okay, got it.
He uses this really interesting mix of like Bible stories, personal stories,
Right.
and practical advice. So it's definitely one that makes you think.
I see. So what stood out to you? What really grabbed your attention in this sermon?
Well, he kicks things off with a story about two soldiers. And it's not just any story, it really sets the scene for the entire sermon.
Oh, a story. Tell me more.
Okay, so picture this. Two soldiers are guarding this really dangerous area, okay? They're supposed to be watching out for each other.
Yeah, makes sense.
But one of them gets tired and asks the other to take over watch.
So he can rest, I imagine.
Exactly. But the second soldier, he wants his own break, right? So he refuses, and they actually end up arguing.
Oh, no. What happened? That sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It is. They both fall asleep. And guess what? They get captured by the enemy.
Wow. I mean, it's a story, but it really illustrates the point, right?
It does. And that point is that if we neglect our shared responsibilities, there can be some seriously bad consequences.
Well, yeah, even when we think we deserve a break or something.
Exactly. It's like
Yep.
neglecting those responsibilities can have a bigger impact than we realize.
Right, right. It makes you wonder if there are areas in your own life where you might be putting your own needs above shared responsibilities, doesn't it?
Oh, for sure. It's a wake-up call. And then
Yes.
Pastor Ricardo just jumps right into this age-old question. Am I my brother's keeper?
Now, that's a loaded question.
It is. And he gets it straight from the story of Cain and Abel in the Bible, but then he takes it a step further.
Oh, really? How so?
He asks us to think about anyone we've met who needed help throughout the whole year.
Like anyone at all?
Yeah, like a hungry person you ignored, a struggling colleague, even a family member needing your support.
Wow. So he's really broadening the scope of who we should consider our brother, so to speak.
Exactly. He's holding up a mirror to our actions or inactions, I guess you could say. It's like, are we living up to that responsibility, even in those small everyday moments?
Hmm. That's powerful. And it makes you think about those times you might have looked away or chosen not to get involved. It's like he's saying we can't just ignore the needs around us.
And he really doesn't sugarcoat things. He even calls out that comment and saying, God will bless you.
Oh, I know that one. What's his take on it?
He suggests that it's almost like hypocritical, to
Yeah.
expect blessings while you're hoarding them.
Interesting. So it's not enough to just hope for blessings. We have to be a blessing to others. Is that what he's getting at?
Absolutely. He's challenging us to think about what we're contributing to the well-being of others, not just what we're hoping to receive.
That's a good point. It's easy to get caught up in our own wants and needs.
Yeah, it is. To really bring this idea of accountability in action to life, Pastor Ricardo uses some examples from the Bible.
Oh, I love a good Bible story. Which ones does he focus on?
Well, the first one is Moses and his father-in-law, Jethro.
Okay, I know that one. Moses was leading the Israelites out of Egypt, right?
Yeah.
And Jethro was his, wise advisor. Something like that.
Yeah, you got it. And remember how Moses was completely burning himself out, trying to handle all the needs of his people all by himself?
Yeah, it was a huge responsibility.
Well, Jethro steps in, and he gives Moses this incredibly wise advice. Delegate.
Delegate, share the responsibility.
Exactly. It's amazing how relevant that is, even today.
Totally. So many of us are overworked and stressed, feeling like we have to do everything ourselves.
It's like Jethro was a leadership coach way ahead of his time.
Right. He understood that good leadership isn't about doing it all yourself. It's about empowering others and building a support system.
Exactly. And it made me think, where am I holding on too tightly? Where could I maybe delegate and trust others more?
That's a great question to ask yourself. Sharing responsibility could actually lead to better results in the end and prevent burnout.
For sure. Now, Pastor Ricardo then shifts to another story. This time, it's David and Nathan.
Oh, yeah, the prophet Nathan. He confronted David about his sin with Bathsheba.
Right. It's a story about speaking truth to power.
It takes a lot of courage to do that, to hold someone accountable, especially when they're in a position of authority.
It does. But the story reminds us that it's not about being judgmental. It's about doing what's right, helping each other stay true to our values.
Yeah, it makes you think, am I willing to speak up, even when it's uncomfortable? If it means helping someone or standing up for what's right?
Exactly. But Pastor Ricardo also makes it clear that we have to balance that truth with love.
Oh, that's important.
Mm.
How does he explain that balance?
He uses this analogy of a parent telling their child to take a bath.
Uh-huh. I like that.
It might not always be pleasant to hear, right?
Nope. But sometimes it's necessary.
Exactly. Sometimes we avoid those tough conversations because we don't want to hurt someone's feelings. But Pastor Ricardo is saying that honesty, delivered with compassion, can actually be the most loving thing we can do.
That's a good point. Sometimes we need to hear those hard truths, even if they're not what we want to hear.
Exactly. And then he tells this really touching story about, he calls it the 11-month Christian.
The 11-month Christian, what's that all about?
So this is a person who is really devout, for most of the year. But when December rolls around, they just drift away.
December. Is there a reason for that?
They feel lonely, like they've been forgotten by their church community.
Oh, wow. That's sad.
It is. And it really highlights how vulnerable many of us feel, especially during the holidays, when there's all this emphasis on family and connection.
Yeah, I get that. It makes you think about times when you felt isolated and also what you can do to be more supportive of people around you, especially when they might be struggling.
Yeah, for sure. And then he contrasts this modern day situation with the early church, where people genuinely shared everything and looked after one another.
Oh, right, like in the book of Acts. They were selling their possessions and distributing the proceeds to those in need.
Exactly. And it really makes you think, what happened to that sense of community?
It's a good question. We may not be sharing possessions in the same way today, but how can we create that same feeling of support and belonging in our communities?
It's the key question. And this is where Pastor Ricardo really gets into the practical steps for accountability. He makes it clear that it's a two-way street.
Oh, so it's about holding ourselves accountable as well as holding others accountable.
Exactly. And he's got some really good advice for both.
What I found super helpful was how he breaks it down, like those two sides of accountability.
Yeah, holding yourself accountable and then holding others accountable.
Exactly. And he starts with yourself, which makes sense, right? Like, you got to look in the mirror before you start pointing fingers.
He does. And he gives some practical steps for holding yourself accountable.
Like what?
Well, he talks about being honest first and foremost.
Being honest. Okay, yeah, that seems pretty basic, but it's probably harder than it sounds, huh?
It is, really owning up to your mistakes, no excuses. And then he goes on to being open to feedback, which, let's be real, that can be even tougher.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Nobody really loves hearing criticism, even if it's constructive.
Right. But he's saying you got to let people in, even to those vulnerable parts of yourself where you might not always want to be seen.
It takes a lot of humility to do that, to be open to hearing what others have to say, even if it's not always positive.
Exactly. And that's actually his next point, humility.
Humility, yeah,
Right.
that's a tough one for a lot of people.
It is. It's about being able to accept correction and guidance without letting your ego get in the way.
Right, recognizing that you don't have all the answers and that you can learn from others.
And sometimes even from people you might not always agree with.
That's a good point. It's easy to dismiss feedback from people we don't see eye to eye with.
It is. But sometimes those are the people who can offer the most valuable insights.
I see what you mean. So, honesty, openness, humility. What else?
The last one is being willing, actually willing to change.
Ah, that's the key, isn't it? It's not enough to just talk about accountability. You got to actually do something about it.
Walk the walk, not just talk the talk.
Exactly. So those are for holding yourself accountable. What about holding others accountable? That's a whole different ballgame.
Right. And he starts with this super important point. Speak in love.
Speak in love. I feel like I've heard that before.
You probably have, but he really emphasizes it. It goes back to that analogy of the parent telling their kid to take a bath.
Right, right. It's not about being mean or putting someone down. It's about helping them grow. Like tough love.
Yeah, something like that. It's about remembering that we're all on this journey together, and sometimes we need a little nudge in the right direction.
And sometimes that nudge needs to come from someone else. Someone who cares enough to tell us the truth, even when it's hard to hear.
Yeah. And he also says that instead of assuming you know the whole story, you should ask questions.
Oh, that's good advice.
Ah.
How often do we just jump to conclusions about someone's behavior without really understanding what's going on?
All the time, right?
Probably. So, taking the time to ask questions, it shows that you genuinely care and that you're willing to listen without judging.
Exactly. It's about replacing assumptions with understanding.
I like that. Replacing assumptions with understanding. That's powerful.
And then he suggests something I thought was really cool, praying together.
Praying together, like with the person you're holding accountable.
Yeah. It's about bringing God into the situation, seeking his guidance and wisdom.
Hmm. That's interesting. It kind of takes the pressure off of you in a way, right? Like you're not relying solely on your own understanding.
Totally. You're acknowledging that there's a higher power at work and that you're not in this alone.
I like that. It shifts the focus from me versus you to us together seeking God's will.
And then finally, he talks about following up. This is where, like, the real accountability comes in, I think.
Ah, yes. It's not a one-time conversation and then you're done. It's about showing ongoing support, checking in, seeing how things are going.
Exactly. Walking alongside someone, celebrating their victories, and offering encouragement when they stumble.
Being there for the long haul, not just when it's convenient.
Right. It's about showing up for each other consistently. And then Pastor Ricardo goes beyond just those practical steps.
Oh, what else does he talk about?
He talks about the bigger picture benefits of accountability.
Okay, so what are those, according to Pastor Ricardo?
Well, he reminds us that iron sharpens iron.
Oh, I've heard that one before.
Yeah, it's a classic. But it basically means that we need each other to grow, you know?
Like, we can't refine ourselves in isolation. We need those external perspectives to challenge us and help us become better.
Exactly. We need people to point out our blind spots, the things we might not be able to see on our own. And Pastor Ricardo goes on to say that accountability isn't just a good idea, it's God's design.
God's design. You mean, like, it's built into the fabric of how we're supposed to live?
Yeah, it's a tool for spiritual growth, for
Hmm.
protection, for encouragement. And it reminds us that we're not meant to go it alone.
We're meant to be in community, supporting and challenging each other along the way.
Exactly. And that leads to his final point, which is that we're not meant to face challenges alone. Accountability gives us a framework for mutual support.
So it's about sharing the load, offering a listening ear, being there for each other when things get tough.
And when things are good too, it's about celebrating those wins together. And you know what really struck me about Pastor Ricardo's sermon?
What's that?
He got so personal. He wasn't afraid to share his own struggles with accountability.
Really? That's interesting. Like, he was vulnerable with his congregation.
He was. And that's what made his message so powerful, you know? He wasn't just preaching from some distant pulpit. He was right there in the trenches with us.
That makes it so much more relatable. It's like, okay, even this pastor, this spiritual leader, struggles with this stuff. It makes it feel more normal, more human.
Totally. Like he talked about feeling discouraged, almost wanting to give up on ministry at one point, and he turned to his wife for support.
Wow, that's a powerful example of accountability in action. He didn't try to pretend he had it all together. He reached out for help.
Exactly. It's a reminder that we all need those safe spaces to be honest about our struggles, and that asking for help isn't a weakness. It's actually a sign of strength.
It takes courage to admit that you need help,
Mm.
and it allows others to step up and offer support.
And he didn't stop there. He even talked about a time when the electricity went out during a service, and he was the only one who knew how to fix it.
Uh-oh. Sounds like a problem.
It was because he hadn't delegated that responsibility to anyone else.
So it was a direct consequence of his own lack of accountability. It's like those soldiers falling asleep on duty.
Totally. And he admitted it. He was like, this was my fault. I should have shared that knowledge with someone else.
That's humility right there. It's refreshing to see a leader admit their mistakes and show that asking for help is okay.
So after listening to all this, I was thinking, okay, where do I even start? How do I bring more accountability into my life?
Right, it can feel overwhelming. Like, okay, I need to find an accountability partner, set up regular meetings, come up with goals.
Yeah. And he did talk about things like that, finding an accountability partner or setting clear expectations with someone you trust. But even those first steps can feel daunting.
Oh yeah, for sure. Especially if you're not used to having those kinds of deep, honest conversations.
Right. So maybe instead of diving headfirst into some big accountability program, just try being a little more transparent with someone you trust.
Like, start small. Share a struggle you're facing or ask for feedback on something you're working on.
Exactly. Just dip your toe in the water, see how it feels.
And remember, listening is just as important as sharing. If someone confides in you, don't feel like you have to offer solutions or fix their problems. Sometimes the best thing you can do is just listen with empathy and offer support.
Absolutely. And remember, accountability is a two-way street. Be open to receiving feedback yourself, even if it's not always easy to hear.
It's a continuous journey of growth and learning.
Pastor Ricardo closes his sermon with this powerful call to action. Commit to be somebody's keeper, like a brother's keeper.
Mm.
And it's a call to action that goes beyond just religious boundaries, you know?
Yeah, it's about that basic human connection, right? Looking out for one another.
Exactly. And what really struck me was how he tied this back to our talents, our abilities.
Oh, interesting.
Like he reminded us that we all have something to offer, something unique.
And that we shouldn't keep it to ourselves.
Exactly. He even joked around a little bit, asking people about their
Oh,
talents.
really? Like,
Someone said they were good at drawing, another person said they were great at like inflating numbers.
uh-huh. Okay, so a bit of humor to make the point.
Yeah, but it was a good point. We all have something to contribute, even if it seems small.
Right. Those little things can make a difference.
He did. And he brought it back around to the story of the two soldiers.
Oh, to illustrate the point about recognizing our limitations and asking for help.
Exactly. It's all connected. He even got personal again, talking about how sometimes he's so focused on his own problems, he doesn't even see the needs of others.
That's relatable, though.
It is, but he doesn't just leave it there.
So he challenges us to do better.
He does, to be more intentional about looking beyond ourselves and really seeking out ways to support others.
And how do we do that? What are some concrete things we can do?
Well, he suggests that sometimes just being present for someone is the most powerful thing you can do.
Just listening without judgment, being a shoulder to cry on.
Exactly, and showing up for each other, not with advice, but with empathy.
All right, sometimes people don't want solutions. They just want to be heard.
Totally. And don't forget to celebrate each other's victories, no matter how big or small.
Oh, yeah, that's important. Acknowledge those wins.
He talked about how important it is to encourage each other, especially when someone's working hard to overcome a challenge or reach a goal.
Accountability isn't just about pointing out flaws, it's also about celebrating growth.
Exactly. It's about being each other's cheerleaders on this crazy journey called life.
I like that.
And, Pastor Ricardo, he ends his sermon with this really powerful image. He says, commit to be each other's keepers, extend grace and support, speak truth and love, and celebrate each other's journeys.
Wow. That's a beautiful way to sum it all up.
It is. It's a message that really stuck with me. And as we wrap up this deep dive into accountability,
Yeah.
it makes you think about how we're showing up, both for ourselves and for the people around us.
It does. Pastor Ricardo's sermon really gave us a lot to think about and hopefully a lot to act on.
He did. It's a reminder that we're all in this together. And until next time, keep diving deep, everyone.